Good morning, 9:20. It's Louise on BBC Radio Norfolk. There are now less than 2 months to go until our big celebration of the county this summer.
Norfolk Day.
BBC Radio Norfolk.
So please do get it in your diary, if it's not already in capital letters in your kitchen calendar, the 27th of July. It's a Thursday this year. The theme is Challenge Norfolk, Be More Malcolm. That's inspired by friend of the show, Malcolm Metcalf from Galston, who's taking on 90 challenges to mark his 90th birthday this year. We want to challenge ourselves and challenge the county to seize the day, push the limit and take on challenges to celebrate this corner of the world. But what about people like me? This week, there'll be a few of them about who are getting to know Norfolk better than ever before. How do we really get into the DNA of Norfolk and find out what makes it tick? Well, how about exploring the stories that have been handed down through the centuries? I love this kind of item. Suzanne Arnold is a local storyteller, better known to many as Suzanne the Storyteller. Suzanne, good morning. How does one become Suzanne the Storyteller?
Well, Suzanne the Story Weaver. It kind of came out of my background of being a puppeteer and a street performer and working in communities as a community artist. It kind of, one day I realised that my energy wasn't always going to be there and I needed to do something else. And I suddenly thought, I just want to turn up and just be able to be. And that was it. I suddenly thought, maybe I'll become a storyteller. And that happened about 15 years ago, I guess. No.
What a fantastic life-affirming thing to do. Probably the kind of thing that nobody at school told you could do, and yet you're probably, I'd assume, happier than you've ever been.
Oh, it's amazing. It's something that you can never stop learning about it. There's so many stories out there.
I love a bit of folklore. I grew up in Lancashire. So, I don't know if you know Pendle Hill, the Pendle Witches. We've got some great stories up there. Now I live in Cambridgeshire. And, of course, the two counties share the Fens, which I'm getting to know a little bit better now and starting to realise just how many amazing stories there are tied up and that come out of the Fens. What are your favourites?
Oh, there are so many. I mean, I'm really grateful to a local storyteller and historian and author, Kevin Crossley Holland, because he's written some amazing books putting all these stories in there. And I think some of my favourites are the one about the buried moon is an absolute favourite, on the lights on the Fens. I mean, we're talking about a time when the Fens were marshes and they were dangerous places to be. A long time before Charles II ordered them to be drained. So there are times when there were bogarts and dead hands and witches and there was a whole load of folklore that went around with that and beliefs and superstitions and such like. So the stories that come from that time really embody that and tell you, they pass on the history of that time. Their social history, they have truth in them. It's so important.
I was going to say, I guess there's two elements to that, aren't there? There's how those stories get passed down through the centuries, like physically, how are they told? And then also, I guess the follow-on is, does it matter if hundreds of years later the stories aren't as accurate? Because that's also part of the fable in the first place, the fact that they are passed down through word of mouth.
Yeah, I mean, they are, it's an oral tradition. And what I always find interesting is that in the communities, the women were the storytellers on the whole, especially the older women. They were the ones that were the guardians of the stories. They were the wisdom keepers, the ones that passed on the stories from their ancestors. And these stories, some of them are thousands of years old, but it's difficult to trace them back because if it was the women, they didn't very often learn to write and to read, so they weren't recorded in the same way that a lot of these stories that the men told, and also the folk story collectors were on the whole men. So in those ways, we don't really know about the real history behind the stories, but we can see, as a storyteller, it's really important to keep the integrity of the story. you know, that you feel when you read a story or you hear a story, you can hear the real bones in it and where it comes from. And if it doesn't have that, then it doesn't feel right to tell it. So it's a thing.
And I guess as well, Suzanne, is that it also, even if, you know, it is a bit of folklore, or it's a bit of fun, it still gives us a really important insight into what life was like back then anyway.
Oh, it's the social history in it is absolutely incredible, but it's more than the social history. It's really about people, about humanity. You know, that's what it carries more than anything. Stories are about our thoughts, our feelings, our being, and we do not change as humans. You know, stories are metaphor. They carry the things that are, have been, and will always be, and that we understand on a completely different level. It's not with our brains that we understand it. It's with our hearts, with our souls, really, that we understand this whole notion of being human. And that's what stories do for us. Is they
That's so true, isn't it? Because I never met my great grandmother, for example, or I did, but she'd passed away by the time I was about 2. But just hearing about her life, I feel like I knew her. This is a woman who was very much in my life because I heard the stories about her and about her family. And it does, you can still, we're sort of talking about the DNA of Norfolk, but stories are part of our DNA as well, our family traditions as well. If we're going to be more Malcolm, then, as Challenge Norfolk instructs us to be this year, we could then set out trying to find the oldest stories of our area. Where on earth would we start? So, for example, Malcolm in Galston, he's got enough on his plate with 90 challenges, but if his neighbours want to find out a little bit about where they come from and their stories of their villages, where do they start trying to dig back into the past?
Well, talk to the oldest people in the villages. Go to the county papers and things like that, and really dig back in that way. But it's the older people. I mean, it's one of the things that we're losing at the moment is that thing, because older women in particular, you know, they are not heard. They are invisible in this society on the whole, and they do carry, or they used to carry, your grandmother, like you said. You know, they were the ones that carried these stories. And I have a challenge, which is, where are all the stories about the old, wise women in Norfolk? You know, there are lots of stories about men, about places, but where are the old, wise women? Not witches, but old wise women.
Hey, Suzanne, don't get me started on witches. That's a whole other conversation. You must come on and talk about that. Interestingly, I do the Sunday breakfast show on BBC Radio Cambridge, and we've been doing a lot about the religious women involved in the growth of Cambridgeshire. And it's amazing then that even hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years ago, there were saints, there were abbesses, all women, all who finally now are being talked about a lot more. And you realise the importance that women did have in the building of the Christian church in Cambridgeshire. So it sounds like, Suzanne, you have got a one-woman show in the making there, The Wise Women of Norfolk. I'll come
Absolutely.
and see it.
Yeah, no, do. But yeah, if your listeners out there, if anybody out there has got any true story, you know, they don't have to be true. What am I talking about? Any stories that they know of wise women of Norfolk, I would love to hear them.
And when can we see you telling your stories next, Suzanne?
Well, I run a storytelling club at the Locks Inn at Geldeston, which is just on this side of the border from Suffolk, and that's the third Thursday of the month. Every month, I've been doing that for 11 years this month.
Wow.
So it's I think the next one is the 15th of June. Starts at 8. We'll be outside around a tree, and we've got a special guest this month, which is a person who's talking about oaks. And other than that,
hang on, oaks or oats?
Oak,
trees, not your porridge. Quercus. Right, got you. Yeah. Thanks very much, Suzanne. Absolute pleasure to chat to you, Suzanne, the story weaver there, otherwise known as Suzanne Arnold. Good morning. Just coming up to 9:30.